Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this evening's live stream. So if you've come to the right place, you'll find that we are going to be talking about student finance this evening. So over the next about probably 45, 50 minutes, we're going to go into some detail on what to kind of expect. We can't promise to put the fun in funding, but we'll certainly promise to put as much information into the stream as possible. Now, if you do have any questions, most of this will be focused around UK kind of finance and what's available. But if you do have any questions at any point, pop them in the comments. You know, if we don't know the answer to your question, we'll pop a link in there to help you to find the answer to the question or how to contact us after the stream, so perhaps tomorrow. So yeah, I've got some colleagues with me today to help with some of these facts. What they don't realise is they're kind of nominating me as the host of today's session, is that they have to be the ones to remember all the facts and all the figures as well. So we'll see how it goes this evening. If you are watching on your mobile phone, you might find that you do need to pop onto a laptop or an iPad to be able to write a comment. That might do correct me if I'm wrong, anybody here. But yes, so you might need to switch devices if you do want to post a comment or just say hello, let us know you're watching. Any concerns that you might have about student finance, let us know. We'll make sure we gear the talk this evening towards what you want to know. So thank you for joining us instead of going out and building a snowman if you're here in Leicestershire, although I think there's probably not that much snow left now. And I guess we're going to make a start on kind of what help is out there, what's available. Then we'll kind of go through the application process. We look at repayments as well, and also some top tips. And I think probably with Michaela being our most recent graduate, probably has some great top tips on how to make that student loan stretch as far as you possibly can. Always really, really important when you're at university to budget and make your money go as far as possible. So I think we're going to start with Nikhila, actually, and maybe Nikhila, you can tell us a little bit about what kind of help is available.
Yeah, of course. So first and foremost, when you do attend university, you aren't expected to pay for everything yourself. Obviously, it can be quite a costly period of time in your life. So there is support available from the government. We will pop a link in the website to our student finance website. So that's the government website, which will go over the full eligibility details in there. But just so you are aware, universities can charge up to £9,250 per academic year for tuition fees. That is obviously potentially can sound a bit daunting, but loans are available to cover up to the full cost or part of the cost, however you wish to do this. And this is currently available to all UK students, but obviously with certain changes, with Brexit, etc., it's best to check how EU nationals are going to be affected by all of this, because there may be some changes in place. So definitely check on the link that we've posted if you are eligible, because you can fill in a few details and check. Now, the way that this works is you have your tuition fee paid directly from the student loans company directly to the university in 3 instalments. So at the start of each semester, that money is paid directly to the university, and that is straight away put into the students, put into our bank account on behalf of the student. And it is also worthwhile noting as well that there is no upper age limit on this, so anyone can apply for student finance as long as they haven't studied a degree before, and in most cases you are eligible for the full amount of funding. And Just so you're aware of what this does cover, this will cover your academic time with staff and any support staff that you come into interactions with. This will cover a variety of support services, and also will cover our library and our online and physical resources. So that all comes under your tuition fee costs. And it also does cover your degree, so your degree certificate, and your entry into your exams, which you will have throughout the course of your studies. And yeah, those are just a few things that your student loan does cover in terms of the fees.
Great, thanks, Nicola. And I think it's really important to know that tuition fee loan is available, and it doesn't come down to how much money you do have, how much money you don't have. So hopefully, if you're thinking about going to university, you're not being put off by the student finance, thinking that you can't afford to go, especially because as well as the tuition fee loans, there is also some support there as well for actually your living costs. And I wonder, Henrik, if you could tell us a little bit about some of the living costs that you might occur at university.
Yeah, of course, Faye. Obviously, depending on your situation. So if you are someone that is thinking of living at home versus potentially moving out, you might find that your living costs do differ quite a bit, and that will reflect in how much you end up spending or how much you end up needing as part of the loan that Nicola was mentioning. But typically, think of a student that is probably going to, consider moving away from home. They might have to pay for things like rent. So rent is a big thing, and it's one of the most expensive costs that you have as a student, especially if you are one that is considering moving out. And that might also entail certain bills, things like gas, electric, water, maybe internet, that kind of thing. So definitely something worth looking at when you're thinking about going to university. If you're going to live in an accommodation that is private to that university, typically bills might be included within that. So you might pay a little bit more per week, but then all your bills are included within that. If you're going to live in private housing, like I did in my final year, you then do have to, with your mates, you have to divvy up all the bills and sort that out between you. So that is another thing to consider. And then you've got other things that you might deem to be essential, things like course materials. So obviously you will need them to complete your course. You might need to buy certain textbooks, certain journals, maybe certain pieces of equipment, different softwares, that sort of stuff. If you've not got a laptop, you might want to buy one of those before you go to uni. So all you can see that, depending on your situation, your needs and your necessities might differ from each individual. So it really is totally up to you. And then, if you are someone that is thinking about moving out, you probably have to buy your own food and groceries. And then same again, you can choose how much you want to spend on your food. If you want to shop in Lidl, you might be able to do a weekly shop for £30 odd a week. If you want to be a little bit more of a snob, you can go to Waitrose, which we probably wouldn't advise as a student, but you can quickly burn through your student loan if you're going to be buying, expensive groceries. And then you've got things like clothes, sports gear. You might have to pay certain memberships to be part of sports clubs at your university. Takeaway coffee, that's something I spent a lot of my student loan on. I think probably got a takeaway coffee nearly every day. Just by making one yourself, you could save yourself a little bit of money there. But the point I'm trying to make is that everyone's needs are a little bit different. So I guess you've got your maintenance loan, which is there to sort of help with your living costs when you're at uni. But what you spend that in really does determine. It's really down to you, and everyone's got different needs and preferences, really. So I guess there's no right or wrong way to spend your money, but definitely sort of think about what you might need to get you through that year and maybe budget accordingly.
Yeah, I imagine you've saved quite a lot of money the past year, Henrik, on takeaway coffees. Not to out you on your coffee addiction.
Oh, I've got the espresso machine makes up for that. I think that's pretty expensive, to be honest. So, but yeah, definitely, yeah. No, definitely. But you'd be surprised, like the price of a coffee every day, £2-3. If you add up over the course of a week, it's quite ridiculous when you actually put it into context. But yeah,
it soon tots up, doesn't it? And I think, like you said, you'll have your priorities of what's important to you. You might think that your food is your world. Everything has to be, the nicest quality, and that's your thing, and that's absolutely fine. But then you might decide, okay, well, where can I skimp in other places? And I guess you just kind of think that, what's kind of important to me, and what can I kind of save a few pennies on, I think. And Ben, maybe you can tell us then how can you afford these kind of living costs, what kind of loans might be in place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Henrik touched on it a little bit already, obviously mentioning the maintenance loan. So this is the kind of the other half of what you would apply for when you apply for student finance. So and this is the essentially the figure that would go into your bank account, rather than obviously, as Nikila said before, that the tuition loan goes straight to the university. This would actually go to the bank account that you allocate on student finance to say, yes, I would like this money to support me at university. And this is done through 3 installments through each year at university. So you get one lot in sort of roughly October when you start. You get another lot just after Christmas in January, and then you'll get your third amount in usually around April. So that's when you'll get your kind of student finance loan. So that's when you'll know to get your kind of installments, and you can kind of plan around for that, as we've kind of touched on here. You know, it's about not burning through all of that. It's about not kind of spending through that, but obviously making sure that you've got enough to kind of cover all your expenses. If you are moving out, cover your food, and obviously a little bit of social life, because that's a good part of university as well. So the maintenance loan, again, is available to students to help with those living costs, and it's eligible to all students to get some maintenance loan support. But how much you get can differ. It's what's known as means tested against your household income. So when you are looking at it and when you are calculate it on the student finance websites, you'll have the option to put in your parents or guardians details, so it can total up roughly how much that household makes, and they'll calculate that to see how much you're likely to get. Now, again, like I say, these figures do vary. If your household income is under 25,000, then you can apply for the full rate of maintenance loan, and that is if you are going to somewhere in the UK. It is normally, let's have a look at some of these figures on screen because they've all been changed and updated. It's £9,488. So that is the full amount that you could potentially get if that household income hits under the 25,000. If you are deciding to stay at home, so rather than moving out for university, if you stay at home, you get the 7,987 figure. And then if you decide to go to university in London, where of course, as we know, the living costs are slightly more expensive. If you go to a university in London, it's obviously that 12,000 figure there on the right hand side. And then obviously you can see that changes, the figure changes based on, again, how much that total income is. And they'll obviously look at that and use that as a figure to see how much you're likely to get. And that 3-way split that I mentioned before, where I said that you get a different lot each term, that will essentially split that figure. So whatever you fall into, let's say it's the £9,488, splits that 3 ways and gives you the first lot in October, January and April, as I mentioned before. So this is all done via the student finance website. And I can see we've already had a comment come through from Navid who says that the actual maintenance calculator, which is exactly what I was going to suggest, apparently has not been updated for 2021 yet, which is a little bit unfortunate. So hopefully they update that when student finance opens, hopefully over the next sort of month or so. We typically hear it opens in sort of Feb or maybe the latest early March. So once that opens up, hopefully we'll see that calculator updated, and that will give you, again, a good indication. If you can pop your parents' details or guardians' details into there, give you a good indication on how much maintenance loan you're likely to get and how much you've got to work with. So it's very important that you're aware of this. It's very important that you're aware of how much maintenance loan you're likely to get, because again, some of those things that Henrik talked about before, they're going to impact on your university experience and could impact on things like, you know, what accommodation you choose, etc., so that you know exactly, or, you know, as close as you can, how much you're going to have to work with when you get to university. And again, it is also reflective on whether you decide to go to a university in London or whether you decide to stay at home. These are other things that could impact your experience. So as I say, it's means tested against that kind of those kind of figures. So make sure you're aware of those, and you can pop those into the student finance application when it opens up, and that again will allow you to apply for that maintenance loan. And providing that you do it within enough time, because we do have a lot of students that will leave it until, you know, closer to the time or closer to when you start. As long as you've applied early enough, you'll find that you'll get all that figure, you'll get that money, and that will allow you to obviously start spending that on, again, things like rent and, you know, course materials, and again, some of that social life aspect that we've already mentioned.
Yeah, with those figures, thank you, Ben. They do have a bit of a jump between pay scales, so you still can use the government student finance calculator. It might not be, you know, 100% accurate at the moment. It does need to update, but the difference isn't massive. So you can still use the student finance calculator on the government website to get a good idea of what you will be entitled to. And you will notice that obviously the higher your household income, the less maintenance loan that you'll be entitled to. And I guess there is that kind of expectation, perhaps from the government, that there will be financial support available from family, from parents, if you're currently supported by your parents, if you live with them, for example. So do you have that conversation sooner, I think, rather than later, as to if there is that support available? It might be that there isn't, and it's just good to have that conversation so you can start making a plan. Work over the summer holidays, perhaps. I remember I worked full time over the summer holidays before Christmas to help give myself a bit of a safety net before starting university. And you might also want to have a look at flexible part-time work whilst at university. And we'll mention that a little bit later under our kind of tips for helping you to, be able to afford university, be able to make sure that you're living how you want to live. If you want to get that, maybe more expensive accommodation, and you're wondering whether your maintenance loan will stretch far enough, it might be that you want to look at perhaps earning a little bit of extra income. All right. Next part is actually the application. So we've gone over the tuition fee loan, we've gone over the maintenance loan, and what kind of things that you would have to pay for whilst you're at university. And Ben kindly reminded me about actually when you apply. So usually it's end of February, beginning of March. You can already sign up for updates with Student Finance England, and they'll let you know when you can apply. So if you give them your details, your email address, they'll get in touch with you. And usually the window is between end of Feb, beginning of March and May for making sure you secure your student finance in time or on time for university. But Nicola, perhaps you can give me a little bit more information about the application process itself.
Yeah, of course. So I think this is one of the things that is very, very easy to put off. It always seems like when you're going to get that student finance drop is so far away, but we really do advise you get started with this sooner rather than later, because in particular, if, for instance, your family members that you live with have their own business, it can be quite a lengthy process. They do require, Student Finance England does require proof documents to be sent in. So the sooner you get started with this one, the better, really, because obviously if there are any blips that need to be sorted out, or they request any documents from you that you perhaps haven't provided, the sooner you get on with this, the less likely there is to be a delay with student finance arriving for you. So that would definitely quite stressful when you start university, so do get started sooner rather than later. I think every year there's always those few students who leave it to the very last minute, and then they're waiting for student finance to drop on the day that everybody else gets that text message, that great text message that you're waiting for every semester saying the money's coming. And there's always those few people who have left it to the last minute and are delayed in getting that money. So definitely get started as soon as you can. Now, the way that you can apply for student finance is through the links that we will provide for you. So that's the slc.co.uk, or there's a gov.co.uk website that we will link. And you can use that, as we've said before, to use the student finance calculator to check your eligibility and the available amount that is there for you. Obviously, I appreciate this isn't up at the moment for 2021, but as Faye said, the previous year's calculator might be up, and it will give you a rough idea, and perhaps there will only be a slight difference anyway. So that is the website that you use to apply for student finance. And in terms of how you go about this, so first of all, you'll be asked to create an account with a customer reference number and a password. So make sure you keep those two secure, because it will be tricky if you are unable to find the password every year. It always happens, so just keep it safe. It is quite important. And as Ben said, this does open normally towards the end of February for the September 2021 intake. So look out for those dates. It's really important. And then the deadline at the moment is the 25th of May to get it in on time, so that there's no delays with the money arriving for you. And you will also need an email address to do this, so do make sure you've got one ready. They will ask you for a passport number or a original birth certificate as proof of ID. So make sure you've got your documents ready. You don't want to be hunting around for your password, because gosh knows, barely anyone's been using them at the moment. So make sure you've got that ready and in place. And they will also ask you for your university and course details. So that's your preferred choice. Now, do bear in mind, if you do end up changing your choices down the line, if you enter something like clearing, UCAS extra, anything like that, you can change your mind on which university you're attending and the course that you're studying, but it's best to get started with the process, even if you're not 100% sure, just because it's easy to change that later down the line, but it's difficult to start the process from scratch later down the line. So what else? You need to also include your sponsor's contact details. So do sit down with your friends and family members who you live with, whether that's your guardians, parents, whoever that is. Just have a little conversation with them so that they can expect an email from Student Finance, because they will be contacted separately to ask them for their details. So if you do sit down together and just have a look at it, it's a lot easier. So they're not a bit shocked, like, who is this? Why are they in my inbox? Why are they asking about my financial background? So they're aware of what's going on. So there's information about any support that you're already getting as well, as health evidence if you're applying for DSA. So as we've said, obviously it is means tested, so they will look at your family's or whoever you're living with household income. So you'll need to have some key documents ready, but if you go through Student Finance, they'll let you know which documents they require. I think that's everything that we needed to cover for how to apply. But yeah, definitely get started sooner rather than later with it.
Yeah, and we've got a couple of questions. I was just going to say, with the student finance application, I think it can take 6 to 8 weeks to process. Yeah. And with the DSA, so anything to do with disabilities, so it could be ranged from lots of different kind of what's classed as disabilities or learning differences, and that could be, I think it's up to 12 weeks. So whether you need support with assistive technology or a person, for example, to support you, but it can take up to 12 weeks to process that DSA application as well. So it's better to crack on with that. And also share information. When you apply to student finance, you can disclose this kind of information with them. So they share that with the universities. They can kind of let you know what's available. And you can also notify universities with your application if you haven't done your application yet, or you can let universities know later, just so they're prepared for that for when you actually start university and have the support available for you. Now, just popping back to some of the questions. So we have, can international students apply? It depends on lots of circumstances. If you're already living here, for example, then it might be possible depending on how long you've been here. It can be, if you're an EU, it might make a difference if you're an EU student or non-EU as well. So just pop into the student finance calculator. We will pop that into the comments. The student finance calculator, it will ask you where you're from in that calculator, so you can start making the necessary plans for coming to a university in the UK. When does student finance open for students starting in 2021? So we don't have an exact date. Student Finance, which sounds crazy, but Student Finance England actually kind of let you know the day it's open, which is unusual, but hey ho. And usually it's the last day of February. It can change year to year. Again, you can register already with Student Finance England to receive updates, and they will drop you an email when Student Finance is open. So you can be ready to start your application, create a username, everything like that, log onto the portal and get started with it. Ben, do you want to tackle this one?
I can do, yeah. So I talked about this a few minutes ago. So with regards to the maintenance loan, you can absolutely still take a maintenance loan if you plan on living at home. It might even be, if our friend down behind the scenes is on the ball, if you could pop the slide up again just really quickly, just to show how much you're likely to get and how that kind of differs for those that are going to be sort of staying at home. There we go, perfect. So just looking at that figure, that household income on the side is just for those that are is just the kind of figure of your household income for parents and guardians. You can pop that in, and that will add a variable to how much you're likely to get for your maintenance loan. Where it says home is how much you're likely to get depending on the household income on the left. So that varies ever so slightly, as you can see there. Obviously, you can see the middle one is if you decide to stay in student halls essentially, and then the one on the right is if you decide to go to somewhere in London. So I just thought we'd pick that up there and just show you that slide on the screen for you. But yes, you can absolutely still apply for maintenance loan, and if you check on the Student Finance website, a lot of those figures that we've just flashed on the screen there will be available, so you'll be able to check those out. But For a lot of students, particularly if you are going to be staying at home, if you're thinking of things like commuting, that maintenance loan can go a long way towards supporting the things like the travel costs. So it's worth having a look at. But on the flip side, I've got friends that went to university and they had the opportunity to stay at home because they stayed quite local. They didn't take that maintenance loan, which means that obviously the result of that means they've kind of got less to pay back in terms of their student finance. Obviously, we're going to come to repayments, and repayments aren't as scary as they sound. So in some ways, I would recommend still potentially taking that maintenance loan to support you, because it means that you don't have to worry about having things like part-time work and that sort of thing, and you can focus a little bit more on your studies. So there's a couple of things to weigh up with a situation like that, but it's definitely one to consider.
One thing I do want to add to that as well is that I do know a couple of people who did live at home, chose not to apply for the maintenance loan. I think they probably underestimated the cost of when they're at university, things like Ben mentioned about transport and things. They'd perhaps not considered how much it would actually cost them. And then they decided to apply for the maintenance loan once they were perhaps into the first term of university. It can be a bit trickier to do that, and it does take perhaps a bit longer to do. So do really have a think about your budgeting and whether you would be able to afford to attend university without the maintenance loan, because it can be a bit trickier to do it later down the line. You can apply later once you've already started university. But as I said, it does take a bit longer and it's a bit tricky to process. So just bear that in mind, really.
Yeah, thank you for the questions coming in, everyone. That's great. We want to make sure that we are answering the questions that you want to know, and as best as possible. And Naveed, we're going to come on. You keep preempting us. You're clearly very much on the ball about nurses and midwives, and certain other healthcare professionals courses will receive a grant, so free pots of money, and we'll come on to that in just a bit as well. But yes, you apply through the NHS as opposed to through Student Finance England or through the university. So there's some information there. We've popped it into the comments as well. But we'll fill you all in a little bit more on things like bursaries, scholarships in just a bit. Yeah. Moving on, shall we? So we've covered tuition fees, maintenance loan. We've covered how to apply as well, what kind of costs you'll incur at university. So I guess really what's really important to know is the repayments. And I think that's very much on a lot of people's minds. I think that, you know, we hear so much in the media about students being racked or, you know, with crippling student debt, you know, totting up every year. But in actual fact, the repayment system is actually probably one of the best the best loans that you could receive. And, you know, if you don't earn, you don't pay. So, Henrik, could you give us a little bit more information about repayments and help hopefully set some minds at ease?
Yeah, of course. And I think like obviously I think Ben mentioned and both yourself, it can be one of the most sort of intimidating thoughts of you know, potentially going to uni is obviously the costs that are involved and getting things like loans. But when you actually break down the repayments, you actually have a look at, you know, what the repayments are. They're actually really you know, not too bad. And I think what we try to tell people as well is that you want to see this as more of like an investment into your future. So obviously by going to university, you know, you're going to hopefully improve your chances of getting the job ladder quicker and that kind of thing. And you potentially pay off your student loan. It's not too much of a big deal if you don't, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. But you know, you are investing in your future. If you choose to take the loan, like as obviously Ben said, you don't have to take any loan. So you don't have to take a maintenance loan. You don't have to take a tuition fee loan. If you're in a lucky enough position where you can pay your tuition fee loans outright, then fair enough, you can go ahead and do that. But majority of students will at least take a tuition fee loan, and then they'll take the maintenance fee loan just to sort of help their time while they're at university and give them that peace of mind, so that they maybe don't have to, you know, get a part-time job and that kind of thing. But when it does come to you graduating, all of your previous loans will be consolidated into one. So you're only making one repayment. And how that repayment works is it just comes out of your payslip from your employer. So you don't have to go and make a payment every month. It's just deducted just as tax would be, or your national insurance contributions would be. So it's another thing you don't have to worry about. If you're also in a position where you're thinking of getting a postgraduate loan and you're doing a master's, that payment will get taken as well in a similar sort of scenario. But when you graduate, you don't make any payments till you graduate, and then repayments start from the April after you've graduated. And I think that one of the biggest things that people need to be aware of is that you don't actually start making any repayments until you're earning over 27, just shy of £27,300. So if you're a graduate and you've gone straight into a job where you're earning that salary, then fair enough, that's really good, fair play to you. But you don't start making any payments till you're at that sort of £27,300 mark. And then your actual repayments are super slim, as you can tell by looking at the graphic on the screen. So gross annual income, if you're on a £30,000 a year salary, your monthly payment is £20 a month, which is really not a lot. Thinking about to the coffees I was discussing earlier, that's a price of, a few coffees for that month, really. So if you want to weigh up what's more of an investment, drinking that Starbucks caramel latte or, potentially getting a degree, I think obviously the degree trumps it every single time. But as you can see, as your income and your salary does increase, your repayments do increase as well, but there's still nothing too, out there, too crazy. So the most, if you look at 60,000, if you're a graduate on £60,000 salary, then yeah, that's really, really good. But you're still only paying, £250 a month there. So when you actually break it down and put it into context, the repayments really aren't as scary as they initially sound and initially think. So you're only paying back 9% of your earnings over that £27,295. And you have 30 years to pay that back. If you don't pay it back within that 30 years, it gets wiped, essentially. And there's no penalty for early repayment. So I don't know, if you inherit a bunch of money or something and you want to pay off your student loan, you can do. There's no punishment, there's no early repayment fee or anything like that. But I mean, what we do tend to say is, it's nothing you need to really worry about. Your sort of student loan, just sort of, you chip away at it every month without you really knowing. It gets deducted from your pay slips. Another question that we do get quite often is, say if you start your course and potentially you decide that university is not for you after maybe the first term or something, and then all you do is, at the same scenario, you pay back essentially all that you've borrowed, but it's still only after you earn over that threshold where the repayments start. So yeah, when you actually sit back and you think about how much you're actually paying back every month, it's really, really not, it's nothing too scary. It doesn't work like a typical loan or a credit card where they sit on your credit file. So if you want to go for a mortgage, something like that, they will impact you. A student loan doesn't impact your chances of, getting things like mortgages or car finance or anything along those lines. So yeah, when you actually sit back and have a look at the figures, I don't think it's anything anything to worry about, really. I mean, I think most people, maybe do have a little bit of apprehension about it, but when you actually put it into perspective, it's not really too much of a big deal.
Yeah, fabulous. I think hopefully that has helped to ease some minds. If you're not earning, you're not expected to make repayments, and it's still wiped after 30 years, regardless of how much you've paid off. You paid nothing, it's still wiped after 30 years. So yeah, absolutely great that it doesn't affect mortgages. This case has popped in there. It's if you want to buy a nice car, Henrik, that won't come into play. So that's fantastic. And we do have some more comments here, which is fantastic. We had one about interest fees. We are being tested tonight, aren't we? Is it really worth getting a maintenance loan or even, for example, tuition fee loan, bearing in mind the interest fees? And interest fees is something that we do want to mention. It is charged on top of whatever amount of money you have borrowed. So I guess they kind of look at it and think, okay, well, we're giving you this money towards your education. So they pop on the interest fees. But bear in mind with that, it's unlikely that you will repay your student loan anyway. So even if they add interest rate on top of it, it's unlikely that you will pay the full thing off within the 30 years that's allocated, unless obviously you start earning with high earning potential and progressively kind of climb the salary scale. So it's not something, again, to fear too much there, or to fear at all, because again, it still goes on what you're earning, and even if interest fees are being added on, if you're not earning, you're not making any repayments, whether that's interest or the actual loan itself. We have got some interest-free rates actually to show you on screen. So we do look at things like the interest rate as it currently stands within the country. So currently, I believe that's at it's RPI, so rate of inflation at the moment it's 2.4%, plus up to 3%. So if you're good at maths, this might absolutely make sense to you. If these numbers are going completely over your head, don't worry, you can check all of these online as well, or you can replay the stream if you want to, and kind of help this to sink in. So if your earnings are below the threshold in which student finance start charging you, they charge just the rate of inflation only. And obviously that can change depending on what the rate of inflation is in the country. And then if your earnings are between your 27,000 and 47,000, it's the rate of inflation plus up to 3%. And then past that, you're looking at the full 3%. So that's kind of interest rates in a nutshell. You do get a kind of a breakdown every year. Student finance you can actually log on now. It's just recently changed, and you can log on and you can have a look at what your monthly repayments are. You can have a look at what interest you've been charged that year by logging on to your account online, which is fabulous. It used to be a letter every year, so we've gone paper free.
Mm-hmm. Just to add on to that as well is that I think one of the things that can be quite daunting before you attend university is that it can seem like this debt feels like it's looming over your head and it's like some massive thing you've got to pay back. In actuality, it doesn't, I don't know if you guys would agree, but it doesn't really feel like that at all. I more view it as an investment in my future and an investment into potentially earning more in the future rather than like a loan. And as Henrik said, because it doesn't affect your credit rating, it doesn't affect your ability to buy a house or a car or any other purchase that you want, I wouldn't really consider it a loan as such. Obviously, it is a loan in theory, but it doesn't massively feel like one. So if that is your main concern when you're thinking about university and it is finances that is mainly worrying you, don't really see it as that way, because as we've shown you, obviously, unless you earn above that threshold, you're not going to be paying it back. So try and not let it be something that worries you. Obviously, be aware of it, be aware of what the repayments are, etc. But it isn't a massive concern.
Yeah, I have literally, also apologies for dropping out there. My cat stepped on the keyboard. Just the joys of working from home. But I've literally, because I genuinely couldn't remember how much I repay on my student loan. So I've just logged into my payslip while we have sat here spoken about it, and I can tell you exactly how much I pay every single month, or at least I paid last month in my student loan, and it was a grand total of £19 last month. That is literally nothing. That is a couple of coffees out of Henrik's pocket that I paid for there in a whole month. So that for me, I think is representative of how the repayments kind of work and how much it is there to kind of support this loan is there to support students. And as we've talked about, it really doesn't have these kind of negative impacts in regards to mortgages, credit rating. I've not had any issues with that personally, so it's not something that you kind of fall into an impact with because of the way that the loans are currently set up. I guess this is information that is very relevant to students that are going to be applying this coming September, and these figures do change. So for myself, Henrik and Nikila particularly, we are on the same tier as you guys in terms of student finance. So with those repayment figures, as they change every single year, the threshold adjusts slightly in terms of how much we need to earn for us to be paying back. And that still has an impact even after we graduated years gone. So those are still things worth looking at, and it's always really good to do that research and look at live streams such as today to get that impact. But I just thought it was interesting because I couldn't remember how much I paid, and I did have to check my payslip to find out. And it's not surprised me how little it is, but it's just as an example there so people can see it.
Yep. Got Binky in the background there as well as cats, cats, dogs. So yeah, hopefully that has answered some of the questions there as well. We have got Rashid asking, can students pay their tuition fees as installments? So I'm not sure if that means that you wish to pay for your tuition fees yourself. If that is the case, you can. It's just like with the tuition fee loan, they're paid each semester. So over three installments over the year. So you can speak to university finance teams if you wish to pay for tuition fees yourself and set up a payment plan. But it might be different across universities, so just check that. Nicola, am I right? You can keep me right.
Sorry, what did you say at the end now? Just
She's already thinking about what she's having for dinner. That's okay. We're moving on to the next question. We've got lots of questions tonight. Thanks for keeping them coming. We do have one as well, which I think, Nicola, you can probably help with. It's bank accounts. Maybe Dal will beat me to it.
Definitely. So we're going to come to this a bit later. We were going to come on this later, but yeah, so you can open a student bank account. I would definitely recommend that you do so. A couple of reasons. So different banks offer different incentives to students who open up a bank account. For instance, I went with Santander. I think most people did, and for good reason at the time. So at the time when I opened up the bank account, and this was a couple of years ago, so bear in mind it might have changed, you could earn 3% interest on anything that you had in your bank account up to a couple of grand, and I don't think many students go above that amount. So you earn interest on anything that was there. You were also eligible for a rail card, which covered a third off your rail travel for 4 years altogether. So that was given to you for free. And other bank accounts do have other incentives in place as well. So definitely would recommend opening a student bank account. Mainly, the final reason is that you are able to have an arranged overdraft. So that is an interest-free arranged overdraft. So with Santander, I think it was up to £2,000 you could have this overdraft, and that would follow you into your account, which would then mature into a graduate account when you finish university for up to, I think it's 2 years afterwards. So once you finish university, you have 2 years to pay over that overdraft. So it is definitely good to have that safety blanket in place. I don't mean go and blow it and go and booking all these holidays and buying all these nice coffees and things that Pembroke would probably spend it on. But I would definitely say it is worthwhile to have that comfort blanket. For instance, say if you've got a deposit due for rent and you weren't quite ready for it, it gives you that little bit of a comfort of knowing that you do have that to rely on. So you don't always have to go to your parents every time you need a bit of help. So definitely would recommend it.
Great. Okay. So I think now we've kind of looked at interest rates, repayments, all the kind of tough figures that we've had to kind of remember there, all the repayment facts. Ben, could you tell us a little bit about what if your maintenance loan isn't enough? And this might be the case for some people, and I think that's why it's important that, you know, people have a look, you know, students have a look sooner, see kind of how much they might get if they're moving into accommodation, how much is their accommodation going to be, and find out what's left once that big chunk comes out of their maintenance loan. So what else can students do if they think maybe their maintenance loan isn't going to be enough?
Yeah, and this can be a concern for some students. Obviously, we've talked about the maintenance loan, and sometimes in certain areas you might find that you are you become a little bit strapped for cash. You run a little bit short in terms of the maintenance loan, depending on how much you get. Obviously, based on some things that we've talked about this evening. So, obviously, we want to just highlight there that obviously it's always good prior, if you can, is just kind of have a little bit of a savings pot, particularly for your first year, where you are more likely to enjoy yourself a little bit more, go on some more of the social events. And if you've got a little bit saved up, you can sort of treat it a little bit more like you've got this money saved to one side so that you can enjoy yourself that little bit more in your first year. However, what a lot of students will also do is have a part-time job. And there is absolutely time to have a part-time job when you're at university for many, many courses. There are some courses where that is particularly difficult. We are going to come on to sort of scholarships, bursaries and grants. But for those students that are on an NHS course, as we've mentioned, they're quite intensive courses. And that's why they get that additional funding on top of the maintenance loan that they don't actually have to pay back. So there's different balances in terms of different students on different courses in terms of how much they can support themselves through something like a part-time job. And what I say to a lot of students when they are thinking of doing something like that alongside their studies is making sure that they are treating it with the correct amount of balance between work, obviously part-time job, but also again having that kind of social aspect. And I think we'll all agree, you know, the social aspect of university is brilliant and it's a great time, and it's very often it's some of the highlight memories that you'll have for many, many years to come. So we don't want you to kind of miss out on that. So that's why I just wanted to highlight that there as well. But yeah, absolutely try and get yourself a little part-time job if you can. If you work for a chain as well, from where you are currently at home, so say for instance you work for McDonald's or for a supermarket or something like that, there's sometimes options for you to maybe transfer somewhere a bit closer to your university, it's always worth having just a quick chat with your manager to see if that option is available to you. As I say, we're going to come on to scholarships and bursaries and that sort of thing in just a moment. Nikkila's already mentioned about using an overdraft, and for me that was a big useful thing while I was at university. So I also had the Santander bank account. The main reason for me, the reason I went for that was because of the overdraft. If you don't know what an overdraft is at this stage, it's essentially anything past zero. So if you get to zero in your bank account, anything past that is essentially called an overdraft. And typically banks will charge you for being in that overdraft. But a lot of student bank accounts, or at least the one that I had, they did not charge you for that overdraft whilst you were a student, and I think for up to 2 years after. So 2 years after you graduated, you were still not charged for being in that overdraft. So using that, and I had up to £2,000, was actually a really good risk-free way of having a little bit of extra money to support me, particularly as I got a little bit close to that next sort of lot of student finance. So typically, as I mentioned, you get your student lot in October 1st, and then you get your next lot in January. Well, around December, I was starting to feel the heat a little bit. So fortunately, that overdraft was able to support me. The reason why I say risk-free, and it's always important when you are researching student bank accounts, is to make sure that you aren't going to be charged for something like an overdraft, because as I say, that's typically how banks make their money through overdrafts, is charging you interest on how much you're in that overdraft. Always make sure that it is 0%, as Nikkila mentioned earlier. And on the flip side of that, I cannot recommend credit cards. Just don't do it. Do not do credit cards, because they require you to pay back every single month. And as we've talked about with the maintenance loan, that comes to you every 3 months, which means that there's going to be a couple of months there where you might not be able to pay that credit card back. So avoid credit cards whatever you can, because they're just, in that sense, really not worth using if you do get yourself into a little bit of a pinch whilst you are at university. There are additional hardship funds from your university if you fall into serious financial difficulty. So this is a conversation you can have, obviously, with the university directly, and there are support teams at the university that will help you through things like that. And then going back to the part-time job thing, actually, thank you very much, Faye, for putting that note in there. Universities will often offer sort of part-time work actually with the university that can sometimes be quite flexible around your studies. So we offer, and many universities offer, a student ambassador scheme that allow you to essentially work for the university on a sort of temp basis whenever you're available. You sign up for the ships that you're free for, and it gives you a really good opportunity to just earn a little bit of pocket money. And we have many students that work for us. Some of them have actually appeared in some of our live streams over the last however many months it's been. And as I say, because they only have to sign up when they're available, it means if they've got a tricky deadline or something like that, they've got a little bit more flexibility around when they choose to work. So obviously, there's a few things there to just pick apart. There's a few things to consider in terms of how you kind of support yourself. But again, Nikkila's point about overdrafts is absolutely brilliant. And of course, if you can save yourself a bit of money over the summer before you get to university, that is also going to help you out a lot as well.
Great. And I think we'll move into other pots of money that you might be able to access as well. And we're going to move on to scholarships. And then I think we'll talk about some of the bursaries that you can get. I think we did have a comment about whether, Naveed, on the ball again, do grants, bursaries affect how much maintenance we could receive? It doesn't. You get them in addition. But how about I leave somebody else to fill us in a little bit about scholarships? Henrik, can you tell us a little bit about scholarships?
Yeah, of course. And just want you guys to just look at things like scholarships, bursaries, and grants. Essentially, they're just like free pots of money, really, that various institutions or universities or the NHS, for instance, are giving you to help you through your studies. So they aren't to be repaid. There's a little bit of an echo going on. They're just there to support you through your studies. We will touch on them in a minute. But just in terms of DMU, we do offer a few different scholarships. And scholarships tend to be more for things like high achievement. Maybe you've surpassed your predicted grade. So, for instance, there is the DMU Global High Flyer Scholarship. So they give you £1,000 towards a DMU Global opportunity if you achieve 128 UCAS points or more. There's a DMU Sport Scholarship, so that's for high-level athletes, and you can get between, so I think it's around £500 to £6,000 of support. Obviously, to get that higher bracket, you have to be representing your sport at, I think it's national level, if I remember correctly. And then there's also something called an access scholarship, and that's for students that have got onto a university course by doing an access to higher education course. And I think that's £1,000 a year that the university will give you to help you through your study. So when you just look at those already, you can see that they are nice little pots of money just to bump up your things like your tuition fee, your maintenance loan, for instance. And they can really be the difference between having more of a comfortable time at university, or maybe, as Ben said, maybe just having to like dip into your overdraft a little bit if you need to. But definitely something to look at. They will differ from university to university. So what we will say is, when you are thinking about doing your research and look at different universities, definitely have a conversation with them about what sort of scholarships you might be entitled to. Then there's also bursaries, and they are typically given for financial need. So there's things like care leavers, estranged from family, or for certain specific courses. There are a few bursaries for students that come from disadvantaged backgrounds as well, and they do differ from around £1,000 all the way up to £4,000 of financial support. So same again there, you can see that is quite a big chunk of money that you potentially could be entitled to if you do fall into one of those categories. Same again, have a look at the DMU website, or have a look at any of the websites of the universities you might be considering, because these will differ from university to university. One thing that does sort of is a little bit more common is the NHS bursary. We did have a question about this earlier. So with the NHS bursary, entitled to £5,000 if you are studying a particular NHS course. I think it's nursing, dentistry, medicine, or a related healthcare subject. And that's £5,000 a year to help you through your course. Typically for NHS-based students, they might not have time because they're so busy with their course to get things like part-time jobs. So that little pot money there is just to tie you over if you need it. There was a question early on saying how you apply for that. Now, you apply for that through the NHS website. You have to make an application. It's called a BOSS application. It's through the Bursary Online Support System. And with that, you just need to give some extra evidence to say that you are studying this course, and then that will get processed. So you apply directly through the NHS website for that. And then you get things like travel grants as well, if you're entitled to those. But obviously, there's a lot of information here. There's lots of different scholarships and bursaries out there. So what I would suggest is if you look at the scholarship-hub.org, they will have all the information there, and you can have a look there what you might be entitled to and what different universities have on offer.
Great, thank you, Henrik. Lots of information you've managed to get in there about scholarships, and bursaries, and you can also have a look if you're specifically interested on De Montfort University. We do have a kind of scholarships bursaries page ourselves, which we'll pop into the comments for you to have a browse of what we offer. There we go. It's on the screen now of what we offer at this university. And I think we're just going to finish now on some kind of budgeting tips, some things that we've learned from university, from our experience, just to kind of a little sum up and to end the stream in the next about 5 minutes. So if you have got a question, do get it in now, and we'll try and answer them as quickly as we can within this hour-long stream. Okay, so I'll hand over to you, Nicola.
Perfect, thank you. So as Faye mentioned at the very beginning of the live stream, I am a relatively recent graduate. So I graduated in 2018. So definitely these are recent tips that I have gathered across my studies. So first and foremost, and I've mentioned it before, but it is really important to choose the right bank account and make sure, as Ben has mentioned, that you are making the most of the opportunity to have an interest-free overdraft. It is quite a unique opportunity to have that. So definitely make sure you choose the correct amount that's there for you. Even though we've mentioned an overdraft and we have said it is a good option, if you're perhaps the type of person who struggles with temptation, if having that extra £2,000 in your bank account is going to be too much for you to resist and you're just going to blow through it on silly things, then do perhaps think about whether you need it, because not everybody does use the overdraft very well. So definitely, if you think perhaps, okay, if I'm given that temptation of £2,000, that's too much, You can arrange less of an overdraft if you want to. You just have to let your bank know when you open up the bank account. If you just want a couple of £100 just to avoid that temptation, you can by all means do that. So definitely make the most of that. My tip would be to put out your large expenses first. So if, for instance, you're paying rent out of your maintenance loan, then definitely pay that off first as soon as the money does come into your bank account, and choose the correct repayment for your rent that works for you. So most accommodations, particularly university-owned accommodations, do realise when student finance lands into students' bank accounts. So they do normally have the rent dates in alignment with this. So for instance, you can pay your rent in 3 instalments, or you can pay it monthly, however works for you. But definitely pay out your big expenses first so you can see sort of what you're left to live with. There are apps that you can use to manage your expenses. Faye loves a good Excel spreadsheet. She probably still uses them to this day, and that works for some people. So if it works for you, then great, go ahead. There's also things that you can look into, such as, and this is my godsend, was the Monzo bank account. It's not a student bank account. However, the money leaves your account instantaneously. When I mean instantaneously, when you tap that contactless card, you get a ping from your phone straight away. The money has left your bank account. And the good thing about that is that there are no indiscrepancies against what's left in your bank account and what's pending to come out. So as soon as you spent the money, it's gone. So you can't accidentally overspend and then go into an overdraft. So that's definitely worthwhile. And the good thing about Monzo is that there are pots within this. So for instance, and I still use this now actually, if I've got rent to pay, I will put my rent, as soon as it comes into my salary, I will put that money aside. Fixed living costs that I know that I'm always going to have to pay, I put into a separate pot, just so it's more of like a psychological thing. If I see that I've got less money, I'm less likely to spend it. So that definitely works. Yeah, and there are other apps that you can use, I'm sure, to manage your expenses. So do make the most of technology we have at hand. Another tip would be to not buy all of your books, and it is a big mistake that I made. I studied a degree in optics. The textbooks are yay thick and very expensive, and I don't recommend doing it. So do buy them secondhand if you can. It's also more sustainable as well, so got to get that in there. So if you have a look on Amazon, on eBay, there are so many different secondhand bookstores that you can get your hands on these days, and even most universities. So my university had a section within their bookstore which had secondhand books that they've bought from students who have previously graduated or who no longer need them, and you could buy them first if you wanted to. So definitely do have a look at this, and also remember that the library is there at your disposal, and it is part of the things that you pay for when you pay for your tuition fee loan. So do make the most of the resources that are available to you, and see if you can get the books out in the library, because you perhaps are going to be using a few phrases for one essay and never look at it again. So yeah, just do definitely be a bit sensible about that. You can also make sure that you're bargain hunting. So as we've said, don't be a snob, don't shop at Waitrose, Aldi and Lidl, nothing wrong with it, and you'll save a lot of money and it adds up very quickly. So do bargain hunt and avoid unnecessary costs that you don't really need. And then always make sure to make the use of student discount. I think that's one of the things that I miss the very most about university, aside obviously from all the studying and all of that stuff, is the student discount that you get, because in some places you can get, depending on the time of year, you can get up to like 20% off in, for instance, Topshop, or there's ASOS that do student discount. Most clothing retailers do offer student discount. And even when you're going out for dinners and things, some restaurants are aware, if they've got a particularly heavy student population, and Leicester is definitely an example of this. A lot of the restaurants do offer student discounts, so definitely worthwhile. And you can either download the Unidays app, or there's an NUS card, or I think it's called a totem card now. So there's definitely loads of options there. I'd recommend getting as many of them as possible, because you'll be sure to go to one restaurant and they'll accept one form. So even using your student ID, you can still sometimes use that for student discount. So definitely make the most of that one. And also, finally, make sure you are making the opportunity, when life does return back to normal, of course, to socialise during the weekday rather than the weekends, because most places do have a student night. For instance, one of the nightclubs that are in Leicester, so obviously it's been a while since I've been, but they used to have a student night, and you could get in, you put your name on the guest list and you get in for free, and that would save you about £5. So definitely look into that one. Gosh, that makes me feel so old.
It was like yesterday. Thanks, Nicola. Some great tips from Nicola. I know where to go if I feel like I need to look at finding ways of saving a bit of money. I'll come to Nicola, I'll download the app.
I do pride myself, to be fair.
Or get yourself out a spreadsheet like I like to do, a bit old school. So hopefully this live stream has been helpful. We will, if you have any further questions, We'll pop some ways of how to contact us in the comments. So you could do that through our website. We've got a UniBuddy link. We're on there. We can answer some of those questions for you. And you can also ask questions to our students who are currently going through student finance. You can also contact us on our phone number, on our inquiry email, on WhatsApp even. Lots of different ways to get in touch with us. And if you have really, really enjoyed the stream, again, thank you so much for your questions. It makes it great to ensure that we're answering what you need to know, what you want to know. If you'd like to know more, next Wednesday, we have a live stream on budgeting. We're going to have some students here to actually tell you a little bit about how they budget, what their top tips are, and yeah, ask some questions again. But thank you very much, and we hope to see you next time. So see you later.